Good morning and welcome back to the Orlando Real Estate Buzz. After 3 or 4 weeks of just all kinds of news, it's been kind of restful this week.
It's like we've got the short week, markets are closed tomorrow, holiday weekend, Easter on Sunday. Like news wanted to kind of stop a little bit.
Yeah, I would appreciate it if it can stay that way through Monday. Just, I would like a couple days to after the past couple weeks. We did get some news today that we want to go over. First being GDP numbers came out.
Yeah.
Claims numbers came out.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to kind of look at where real estate is overall, from commercial to residential, and some interesting contradictions, I think, between what our GDP numbers, our jobless numbers are showing, and what the American people are feeling these days. Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to see it between the two different presentations, the two different numbers that we're going to show. I mean, when we hop right into it today, GDP came out, came in third quarter or Q4 2023 came in at 3.4%, which was it 3.3 they were looking for?
So 3.2, I think.
3.2. Okay. So a little bit stronger than we expected. So normally that's going to tell me, hey, things are moving well, things are going okay. And then, whoops, hit the wrong button there. And then the jobless claims came in as well, and we sat at 210,000, or
slightly lower than what they thought.
Slightly lower. Really didn't change. Not going to change the unemployment rate whatsoever. So you look at these numbers, Joe. To me, it's kind of like, okay, things are moving, things are going well, things are, everyone should be feeling fairly comfortable overall. Maybe have a little extra money in their pocket, all that kind of stuff. But it's not the general sense I get out there. Is that what you're? What do you feel? What do you hear from your clients?
I feel the same way. Like, one thing that with like the jobless numbers that came out, I noticed new figures were slightly lower than they thought, but what caught my mind was continuing claims increased, and that went up to 1.819 million from 1.795. So a decent little increase, and that tells me like, okay, well, people that are out of work aren't finding work as fast, maybe, as it was in the past. But we're dealing with a lot of, I feel like, I think if you ask anybody, like, you don't feel like your dollar quite goes as far, do you?
No, we're not around inflation numbers today. It's we'll keep the blood pressure low today. Okay. I don't know who does the grocery shopping in your family. I do in mine. And it hurts. It hurts when you go.
You know what? Gone up in cost.
They haven't? Well, gonna be eating more bananas, I think, than previously. But what reason why we bring this up today is we start getting into what's going on overall in the real estate market. And a few headlines you see out there. Home buyers given slight bit of price relief. Well, prices came down about 0.1%. Is that relief? No, not really.
0.1? Like that they're claiming that's a relief?
Yeah. That's relief. That's relief. But when you look inside some of the numbers, this is the thing that really gets to you. Redfin found that you need to earn $121,000 to afford the median home today. But the problem is the median household income is only $84,000. So are we starting to get a picture of why we're not seeing as many homes sell as previously?
Can't afford them.
Can't afford them. I mean, you and I know we sit and we work numbers. It's, sometimes you're trying to figure out how to help a buyer buy down an interest rate. If we're at that 7%, he's at, a 55% debt to income ratio. But if we can work with the seller and we can get them to buy down the rate, maybe 6.5, all of a sudden we drop to a 48 or a 49% debt to income ratio, and we can get them into the house. And, with this lawsuit, I think that's one thing that's lost on a lot of people. They make it sound like it's so easy to buy a house, but there's so many different things we've done over the years to be creative and to find solutions for people in these types of situations. And that's what you got to do. And, like we've discussed many times, I think we're at that pressure point where something's going to give. I was talking to my home builder in DeLand yesterday, and he finally, brand new home, he builds builds an absolutely gorgeous house. He had a house sit on the market for 8 weeks. Yeah. And he's like, holy cow. And for the first time, he's always a very optimistic gentleman. He goes, wow, market's really slowed down. He goes, but you know that. I'm like, yeah, yes, I do. So he's starting to, here's a gentleman who's always been consistent, is starting to see his end slow down as well. And then, these are other headlines coming in this week. Prices of new homes are off 19% from their peak. And we see this. We've shown it before. Taylor Morrison actually dropping prices, the incentives that they're giving, but they are starting to drop prices. I got Lennar's sheet for Tampa. I think they have 7 developments going on out there, and they probably have close to 300 quick move-in homes. They'll be ready, that are ready now, or will be ready in the end of May. And they can't afford to have these houses sit. That's just way too much money tied up into these houses. And then something we've discussed for multiple months now. Now you're starting to see the news come out with this, is that the multifamily homes are logging their biggest jump in distressed mortgages in 18 months. And that, like we said, that's going to hurt the small banks. And then the delinquencies, again, are becoming a problem for the small banks. So you're just watching this, and 3.4, but delinquencies, not being able to afford to buy a home. There's a divide that's growing between the average American family and what's happening economically out here. And it's frustrating. It's because you want to help people, you want to help them get into homes. I mean, that's one of the greatest joys in the world. When me, quite honestly, is the first time home buyer. That's an absolute ball. When they're in tears and they're just jumping for joy at that closing, that's an absolute ball. So then you kind of ask, like, what's going on around Orlando? Well, here in Orlando right now, we've seen one of the top 5 increases in home prices in the nation. So what you're looking at is we're number 8. But here's the thing. If 121,000 in 2000 has jumped 217% to $384,000 in 2020.
Boy, no wonder why. That's a big jump.
That's a huge jump. What was the average inflation rate during that period? Do you know?
Like 2.5, 2.3?
Yeah, right in that ballpark. So if you took the average inflation rate during that period and applied it to that house, it would actually come out to $177,000 today, as opposed
to the national average, right?
National average.
But that's crazy. Like 177, we'd be like, there'd be buyers right now. Now,
we'd be rocking and rolling.
Have built the wealth that they've had in their homes.
True. But we'd have more people in the homes. We'd have more ability to get people into the homes. Can I see this go a little higher? Oh yeah, of course, because you always got the rules of economics, which is the law of supply and demand. Which we've past several years we've had a lack of.
We've experienced supply. That's what's caused the big reason why it jumped the way it did.
Yeah, and that. But even if it jumped, say 4%, as opposed to but 217 divided, it's basically 10% a year since the year 2000. We'd still be down in the 250 to 275 range for a lot of people on most of these houses. So you're looking at that and you're like, wow, that's just astronomical. And then the other thing that we're starting to see here in Central Florida, Orlando, is the jump in local foreclosures. Florida right now is the number one state for foreclosures. And that could be a number of reasons. One, I think probably bigger than a lot of people think, is the change in insurance rates. I mean, that's just something that has just gone out the roof. And, you have to include that in your most, 90% of people include that in their mortgage payment. I know I've gone from $1,800 to $4,000 in a year.
1,900 to I'm 3,750 or something like that on my insurance.
And I've seen on, Nextdoor, Facebook, people getting bills all of a sudden for $9,000, $8,000 in my community. And you're like, oh my gosh, when does mine expire? Please don't, please do not let it go up like that. Because it's like,
there is probably why we're seeing that foreclosure rate go up in the state.
When you look at it with all the growth that we've had, you think a lot of, I would sell my house, do a quick sale on my house, because there's no reason really, unless you just recently bought the house, that you should have negative equity days. If you bought it any time before 2021, you should be positive unless you took money out. Unless you did some kind of home equity line or something like that, you should be positive. And why would you let it go to foreclosure? Cash it out, take the money, start over again. Don't get that foreclosure.
Yep.
On your credit record, because that's stuck there for 7 years. So you look at that and it's like, these are the things that are giving a different direction and feeling than what we're seeing with the overall economic numbers. I think it's just a tough way to operate right now.
Yeah.
So, but that's really what's kind of going on overall in the economy. When we hop into our numbers for this week, we're going to see same thing is, we're back down to roughly about 400 sales, 387 for the week. Okay. Our inventory is going back up just a hair, up another 45. And then here again, the condos back down to that 130 mark, consistently dropping, with the inventory continuing to increase. And then the numbers we always really like to look at is, the original list to sales price. And on average, people are coming off about $32,000 off the price of their home. That's a significant drop. That's a very significant drop. And we're still holding that 94.5%. Again, that to me is a significant drop. That to me is nowhere near a seller market. I saw one of the a luxury agent who does a lot of stuff on Instagram put out this week, oh, it's still a seller's market. I'm like, are you kidding?
On the perfect properties, every once in a while we run up into these multiple offer situations, but they're the ones where you look at it and you're like, yeah, that thing's going to go fast.
Yeah. But let's look at, because she specializes in the luxury market. Okay. Well, let's look at this. The original list to sales price on homes over $1 million. They're on average cutting $176,000 off the original list price. And they're barely keeping above 90%. They're at 91%. That's not a seller's market.
No,
58 days.
That's, and right now where the marketplace is, that's not nearly good enough.
No, with all the news we're seeing and the feel that people have, they're being more conservative, and they're making sure that their dollar is stretching. When you're paying a 7% interest rate versus a 3% interest rate, that every dollar you spend is well spent. Then we just look at it graphically, and that's what you see. Here it is. here's our median for the past, past what, 3-4 months is sitting right around that 337,000 mark. We're in the spring.
Yeah.
One thing I do love about daylight savings time, I wish they'd leave it alone, is you can show houses later at night. You can go show a client, it's 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and there's still daylight out and you can still, get the opportunity to show people. But we're in the springtime and this number isn't going up at all. It's not increasing.
Yep.
Down a little bit overall. And then, here we go with our inventory. We had flatlined for several weeks, and here we go. We're starting to creep it back up, which you kind of expect, in the spring, as more people, and this probably will increase over the next month and a half.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, if we continue the increase, are we going to see the continued decrease in prices?
Yeah.
One thing I do is on a weekly basis is I actually put out an updated web page with all price reductions for the week, and we've been averaging close to about 150 to 160 price reductions, if not more, on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I do is I put out over 60 days. The number you never had a house. When 2022, 2023, when do you remember any house? It could be falling down.
Weeks.
Anything over 60 days. Now you've got, over 100 homes in each county over 60 days. So it's not a seller's market around. It's totally changed around. And, like I tell a lot of my buyers clients, let's take a look at the ones that are 30, 60 days, because those are our best opportunities to work a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Because, sellers still have that mindset that, my house is wonderful. I'm going to get top dollar. This is going to, I don't have concessions. And 2 weeks in, they're like, oh my gosh, why is my house not selling? Well, because it's not the 2021, 2022 market. Different market, got to use a different strategy. And then coming into the condos, sitting same thing. They're about 95%. But as we discussed, we think that's more of the prices actually starting to come down from where they were previously. So the market going into spring is really kind of stale. It's just it's moving, it's going uphill, but it hasn't hit that crest where it's picking up the speed that we thought we might get, coming into the spring. Your treasury is kind of held steady, between that 4.2, 4.3. So your rates are varying. How much have you seen in rate shifts? Weeks.
It was really wild. We had a lot of movement up, and then we had some big movement back last week. This week's been pretty stable. But one thing that I did notice is we actually had a couple of days where we saw rates slightly improve, right? Even though bond markets slightly worsened.
Mm-hmm.
Bond markets slightly improved. Bond markets improved, but rates improved as well, which usually they work inverse of each other lately. You need to see the bond market go down to see rates go down. But we saw where bond market went up, but we saw rates go down a little bit. So we're starting to see a little bit of compression back to closing that wide gap between the bonds, between the bond market and the fixed mortgage rates, right? Which we said historically, if everything remained the same, we didn't see Fed rate drop, we didn't see anything, but we just stabilized. Like we just stopped seeing wild movement. We would see interest rates naturally probably fall from low 7 to low 6, maybe even high 5.
Okay.
Just by not seeing movement. But right now we have volatility, so it's keeping that spread wider. But we saw the last couple of weeks a little bit more stability, so we saw that spread kind of just tighten up a little bit.
Do you think that's because possibly the Fed held steady?
Possibly, right? Like I think,
or might it be the volume being so low?
It could be that volume's been a little bit dropped down. We could see, the auction for like bond auctions has been pretty solid, right, for demand on the last couple auctions, which will kind of help with that. But I think a lot of it just has to do with, it's kind of that uncertainty. Like when it comes to pricing in markets, right, when people don't know which way it's going to go, they're going to price higher because they don't want to be stuck with something that's going to be worthless if everything else goes higher, right? Mm-hmm. Because these are 30-year notes. These are 15, 20 plus year notes. Like if you're on the wrong side of the risk, like you really hurt yourself as a lending financial, as the institutions putting these prices out. So I think when it is volatile, even if it's volatile in a good direction, they're a lot slower to move down because they're like, hey, like it's that implied, kind of like in the stock market, that implied volatility. When you look at the options of it, the more volatile, the more risky it is. So they price up because it costs more because, there's more movement, right? So less volatile, costs a little bit less, can close that gap.
Gotcha.
So I think that if we see the market stay flat over the summertime, we could see rates continue to pull back even without big economic news from the Feds or so forth. But I do think we're seeing kinks in the armor. We saw Powell change his tune a little bit in his last presser, where it's like all of a sudden, like, it's not inflation. Now it's, like it's that time, it's transient. Like now he's kind of like he's getting away from some of the conversation that was his sticking point before. Yep. He's starting to look at other things, which says like, hey, I think, reading between the lines, like what I'm hearing is they're starting to see, but they don't want to admit it. So they're starting to line up some different pieces to where they know that they can if they need to. But I think they're going to try to hold steady as long as possible. But we see the Fed's drop rate, like we could see a significant movement down in interest rates, which is going to spike up buyer demand, which I think they're trying to hold off. Like, I don't think they want to spike buyer demand.
Yeah, I got the feeling too. It's all going to be, I think, a little bit interesting because if he does the rate cut, like I think about 60% of the people feel he's going to in June, you've also got the changes in our procedures mid-July.
Yep.
Plus, for Florida, you've got hometown heroes literally starting up in about 90 days. So if you're thinking about buying the summer, you've got 90 days to get yourself together for that, because that money went 4 weeks last time, something like that.
In the buying season, when it went out in July, it went super fast, like in a month or less. But then when it came out, when they replenished with the smaller amount in the fall, it lasted a little bit longer than people expected. So I think, though, if we're in buying season, a lot of people have been pent up waiting. I think we could see it go really fast again.
Yeah. I know I'm reaching out to a number of my clients, letting them know, hey, we got 90 days. Mm-hmm. Let's get back in touch with Joe. Let's get everything lined up. So July 1st, we're ready and we've got that money available. But there's a number of dynamics coming in July.
Yep.
That you're right. You kind of feel like there's this dam, pressure being put on this dam, and is that when it's gonna blow up? If we drop, like we've seen in the past, at roughly about 6.5% is when we started to see people get back into the market.
Mm-hmm.
That believe it or not, that 0.5% is making that much of a difference right now. I think that I agree with you. I think there's a ton of pent up demand out there that people are just waiting to jump in. Yep. So it'll be interesting because inventory is building, So anyways, thanks for your time this morning. As always, please like, subscribe, and join us every Thursday. And have a blessed and happy Easter, everyone. Take care.